Over the decades of video games, there are a few franchises that have stood the test of time, evolving from its original formula to become something larger than the sum of its parts. One of the biggest names to this effect is the long-running Resident Evil franchise. Upon its original release in 1996 and seeing where it is today, the franchise has had a lot of ups and downs in its history, both in games, movies, books, and even TV shows. But the legacy of Resident Evil is maybe stronger than it ever has been. With the release of Resident Evil 8, along with the Netflix series, 6 movies, and up to 30 games including remakes and spin-offs, it's safe to say that this franchise is extremely historied. With that, I want to take a look at all of the mainline games that have come out in the series thus far, starting with the very first, Resident Evil 1 on PlayStation 1. Released back in 1996 by Capcom on PlayStation 1, let's take a look into the very first game in this series, the thing that started it all, from the creation of the lore that would further lead into the movies, games, and TV shows yet to come. In this series of videos, we're going to be looking at all the Resident Evil games, from spin-offs to remakes and everything in between, so it's going to be a long and arduous ride, but I think it'll be well worth it in the end. If you like these types of videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. It definitely helps with the algorithm and also lets you know when new videos come out as we take a look into the past of other video games, like we've done for Dead Rising, Days Gone, and many other ones on the channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into Resident Evil 1.
Resident Evil.
Headed up by horror gaming icon Shinji Mikami over at Capcom, the original desire was to recreate one of his prior games called Sweet Home, released in 1989, with a focus on graphical fidelity. But with Capcom no longer having the license to the said franchise, we now have Resident Evil. Taking advantage of the power of the PS1 and its ability to render a 3D space, Capcom created the Spencer Manor, a space which will be iconic in the Resident Evil franchise for years to come in both the feeling and the style. Having released in 1996, I still think this game looks damn good for its time, due predominantly to the pre-rendered backgrounds the game utilizes to create such a well-realized 3D area. While the character models, zombies, monsters, and interactable objects all look pretty pixely, there is no doubt that the backgrounds in every room leave every space feeling iconic and well-realized. The amount of detail in each area is astounding for the time and make each area feel fully 3D, despite being only a basic painting of an asset imposed on a 2D plane. Looking at the main entrance hall, for example, one of the largest areas of the game, while being foreboding to the nightmare that is to come, there is a quaintness to the space, the bright red of the rug going up the stairs, the shading of the columns flanking the two wings, all the cozy end tables hosting the beloved typewriter, the central save point of Resident Evil, a sign of safety as we will realize later in this video. Other memorable area to me is the bar room hosting the grand piano, forest green walls, and a bar top sheen to perfection of hard oak, untouched by the living dead shambling the halls. Every area in this game is a looker, making exploring the inviting space juxtaposed with the horrors within, making a cold, sterile labs underneath the facade of the house much more out of place, and thus pretty eerie. This game was heralded as a graphical powerhouse in 1996, and looking at other games around its time, you can really see why. Even now, having playing it decades later, I still love the look and style of Resident Evil, and I'm glad to see this pedigree of visuals continue even to this day, with even games such as Resident Evil 7 and 8 looking absolutely phenomenal. The team over at Capcom for these games are well versed into making highly interesting spaces, and it still lives on to this day, making the Spencer Manor really the beginning of its style that we continue to see to this day. One main aspect for the style of Resident Evil comes from clever use of static camera angles when roaming the halls of the manors and the labs below. These were done for two express purposes. For practicality's sake, using a static camera angle allows for the pre-rendered backgrounds as we discussed before, also allowing the PS1 to render the game and keeping it looking as well as it does while moving from space to space, even with the loading rooms disguised as opening and closing of doors. Moving around to play space, even in games today, the processing power must be allocated to bring in objects out of view, hence why games have to what is referred to as pop-in, a jarring phenomenon when seen taking players out of the space and time that they're currently in. Keeping the camera angles in certain locations on the area makes everything load the same no matter how many times you come in and out. In a stylistic sense, however, it allows the team to create certain points of horror, leaving the player to not know what's around the next corner or further up the hallway. This means that said player needs to rely on not only their visuals, but the sound design to know if there is a threat in the next room. The thump of footsteps from the hunters, the shambling of zombies, or the snarl of the dogs. Not only that, but it gives the player a sense that someone or something is watching them. You can see this technique used in horror films as well, as many directors utilize camera angles that are off-kilter or awkward being used a lot. This stylistic choice is a technique that also puts the watcher on edge, as our brain detects that this is incorrect or wrong, heightening the tension felt in the movie. This can be best seen with the movie recently released on Paramount called Smile, where it seems like every angle in this movie is just a little bit off center. It Follows is another great example of this as well. Resident Evil incorporates that to its advantage, ensuring that the player is kept on their toes at all times. times. With these angles, however, does lead to an interesting problem. That is, how does one keep the controls straight with ever-changing ways of looking at your character? What may be up on the D-pad may not be the case with walking down the hallway that's facing to the left, only to have the camera angle change to face the character, now having the opposite directional input being what is known as up, which leads us to what gets talked probably most about in the original Resident Evil run, the control scheme. One criticism that I find to be normally levied against the original Resident Evil games would be its controls, and rightfully so to a degree. Compared to games made today, it feels unintuitive and honestly downright bad, hence why the series also dropped these control schemes upon the release of Resident Evil 4. Games have a way of defining a generalized control scheme to eventually unify how a genre should be played. Remember when first-person shooters required you to push in the right thumbstick to aim down sights? This was the case as most recently as 2008 with BioShock 1. With the advent of 3D games in 1995 to 1997, the mode of control had yet to be defined and was still really being refined at the time, every company taking its own different approach to how the player would interact in the 3D area. Nintendo with Z-targeting and the one stick with the strangest controller ever designed, Sega with its taking it all on rails in the 3D flight during the Sega Saturn era with Nights into Dreams or Sonic 3D Blast, and PlayStation was operating under the lauded tank controls, which we see here in Resident Evil 1. Essentially, your character plays much like a tank, hitting forward to walk in the direction you're facing and controlling the pitch with the left and right, spinning in a circle if you're not moving forward. While it took me forever to get used to this when starting the game again, it eventually begins to feel kind of right given how the camera can and will shift as you make your way through a room. With keeping the context of how games are sussing out how the best form of control over the player character at the time, I don't think the tank controls were inherently bad. It just takes some getting used to, much like anything else. I found myself spinning in circles a lot when trying to feather the approach to a puzzle area or fighting a boss, but after the first couple hours, I felt like I was just moving and shaking past all the zombies in the area, which feels really good to do. I'm a lot softer on tank controls, and that's just a personal opinion. Go ahead, sue me. Say that Resident Evil popularized the genre that we now know as survival horror would be an understatement. Resident Evil essentially is survival horror, even you welcome me back to the game, to the survival horror experience upon loading up the game again. Inventory management, slow plotting movements and attacks, and having more enemies and resources are a staple of the genre, all popularized here in this video game. Inventory management is a major staple of RE1, and honestly, maybe one of the most defining features of the franchise as a whole up until Resident Evil 5. Depending on the character you select to begin, Chris or Jill, will dictate how many slots you have throughout the game. Each item you pick up takes a slot: gun, ammo, healing items, puzzle pieces, and even ink ribbons, which allow you to save. With there only ever being a dictated amount of each resource in the mansion, this makes item management a key. I love the push and pull of what to take on your next trek through the halls of the Spencer estate, ensuring that you have the correct items to progress while also making sure you have a gun and ammo to dispatch any enemies that may be in your way if you can't seemingly run past them. Running out of ammo leaves you a sitting duck, and expending all of your ammo in a given area leaves you defenseless in case a hunter or a horde of zombies are in the next room. Thus, leaving the safe room with intent also plays a key role in managing your slots, as these are the only areas really where there are no enemies that are going to be attacking you. Going out on useless expeditions will also end up a waste of precious resources, ones you'll never get back, like herbs and first aid sprays. We mentioned ink ribbons before, which is a choice I both love and hate. Making saving a resource to manage really does ratchet up the tension with each run into the manor, and if you run out for constantly saving, you need to make sure you live long enough to find the next ink ribbon. This makes even the act of saving a choice, as running out makes the game a lot harder for you in the long run. The downside is that if you're someone like me who has to play games in fits and spurts, let's be real for a minute. I have a wife, I have 2 kids, parents who live essentially up the road, and run day-to-day operations for a renovation company. My life is hectic, and so if I have to do a service call or go do something, be it grocery shop, go to a dinner, take the kids to work, or have a service call sprung up on me out of the blue, I need to be out the door, making me save more often than desired or that the game would want me to, edging me up to dangerously not having any ink ribbons and being stuck on a part for the better part of 2 hours due to not having any and no recent saves. Dying will lead to, and has led to, a loss of a ton of progress. Frustrating for sure, but at the core of the design, and especially for 1996, I respect it, and to a degree, even appreciate it. Survival horror, a genre built on resource scarcity from bullets to health, and in this case in the Resident Evil series, even saving the game to shut it off for the night. Like I said, it's more of a love-hate relationship, but you either learn the game or be destined to fail, stakes which I personally enjoy. While the gameplay of Resident Evil 1 is dated by far, there's a ton of systems and devices set out here in the first game that continue on in the series' DNA, making it one of the most recognizable game franchises in the industry. But with gameplay and systems out of the way, let's move on to the story of Resident Evil 1.
It was Bravo Team's helicopter. Nobody was in it. But strangely, most of the equipment was still there.
We begin the game by picking your main protagonist, whose story we'll be playing during the game, Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Taking place in 1998, we are greeted with probably one of the GOATs of the video game industry, full motion video, otherwise known as real-life filmed footage, of a police unit named STARS. Our two main protagonists, Jill and Chris, accompanied by Albert Wesker and Barry, are in search of Bravo Squad, who's disappeared in the woods on the outskirts of Raccoon City, in the search for human disappearances. During their search, the group moves to take shelter in the Spencer Mansion, due to what looks to be like rotting Dobermans attacking their squad, killing a no-named member in the process. The team breaches the house, Chris with Wesker and Jill with Wesker and Barry. Not sure where Barry disappeared to with Chris, but whatever. He must be allergic. It is here that the two paths begin to diverge slightly, but with the crux of what you're doing being virtually the same. Essentially roaming the mansion, solving its various puzzles to work out what happened with Bravo Team and what's going on with the mansion itself. To keep some continuity with the story aspect of this game, we're going to follow Jill on this playthrough, but we will touch on the differences between hers and Chris's near the end. As Jill, we're set out to search for Chris with Barry, where we come across some blood, and in the next room we meet the main enemy of the game, the zombies. In a harrowing scene that we get a close-up of the zombie eating one of the Bravo Team members, turning its head to begin moving for fresh prey. Keep in mind, in 1996, this is a ton of detail and helps contextualize what these series of pixels actually look like, burning the image into the player's mind. From here, we set off across the mansion, coming across more bodies, zombies, keys, and puzzles. A lot of these puzzles seem convoluted as fuck, as the intent seemingly was in its infancy at the time. And while some of these are kind of well executed, a lot of these require the player to just find a key item and bring it to open said area, most of these being fairly obvious. This is where the inventory we discussed before plays a key role, as it forces the player to navigate the halls of the mansion, hoping not to expend precious ammo and resources, and also making you actually think about what items you're picking up. As you explore, Barry continues to pull Jill out of some sticky situations, dealing out some beautiful one-liners such as,
"That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich."
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
And then disappearing to do whatever Barry does when not saving Jill. As you explore, you pick up diaries that shed light on what happened and what's going on in the Spencer Mansion. You see what happened to the people of the house, such as the diary found in one of the bedrooms that you can actively read if somebody turning into a zombie, with the last entry being itchy, tasty. It's pretty amazing that a half zombie could write a diary entry, but it does shed light on that fact that you can actively see that the people that were living here are turning into them. You also begin to learn of the importance of the Umbrella Corporation, a massive biochemical organization with massive influence of the neighboring city of Raccoon City and the United States as a whole. Known for making medicines, pills, you learn the Umbrella has been using experiments with genetic diseases and bioweapons to be sold to governments for the highest price, with one of the main labs being located in the Spencer Mansion itself, the same place you're in. What once seemed like a quirky house of puzzles begins to open up into sterile abandoned labs behind locked doors and underneath the mansion as we move through, discovering the secrets within. With the number of experiments having occurred in the labs, it's not far-fetched to assume that some of these monsters would and did escape, much like what we learn is known as the T-virus did in creating the number of zombies roaming the mansion. Contending with the giant snake, Plant 42 in the guest house, you learn through yet other notes that this was all planned by Umbrella in the first place to lure the STARS team in to test out these bioweapons before destroying the entire facility and thus any evidence of their wrongdoings. In mentioning these boss fights, while they are a spectacle of the time, they kind of suck. Mostly relegated to running around a very tight space and unloading your ammunition upon them. However, with tank controls, for me, this basically just entailed spinning in a singular circle and out healing the damage being done to me. Not very fun, but great moments to be seen for sure. In the same note, we read about the final boss of the game, known as the Tyrant, or as Umbrella sees it, the ultimate bioweapon. As Jill makes her way down to the labs, we run into Albert Wesker, who informs you he's really been working for the Umbrella Corporation all along, and that the plan was all constructed out of his own brain, and Barry has been working with him this entire time, under duress due to Umbrella holding his family hostage in exchange for his cooperation. Wesker takes Jill to the Tyrant, where Barry has a change of heart and shoots Wesker in the back. The two move forward and get a glimpse of the imposing monster that is the Tyrant as he breaks out of his test tube, stabbing Barry and forcing Jill to handle him on her own. Now this fight is a lot cooler than the other two and operates better at a mechanical level given the size of the play space. Constant rotations of the arena while turning to blast the Tyrant behind you as he's charging you over and over again is exhilarating and tense as you move through the area, a feeling essentially gone a long time ago thanks to the amount of ammo and health items I had acquired by the end of the game. Dropping the tyrant for now, Barry and Jill move to escape, getting to the helipad. This is where the game begins to split and having multiple endings, all contingent on saving Barry and Chris, who we find in a jail cell by the elevator of the helipad. Saving both nets you the good ending, where Jill has one final encounter with the tyrant after calling the Star's helicopter from outside, blasting him to pieces with a rocket launcher, and the three of them escaping. This is, for obvious reasons, the canon ending, as the bad ending sees the entire group getting blown up after defeating the tyrant itself as well. Chris's story plays mostly the same, however Barry is swapped with Rebecca, a Bravo team member still surviving in the house, a seemingly frail medic who pulls Chris out of seemingly every sticky situation he seems to get into, from getting serum after the snake fight, to making the Volt plant killer serum, and playing the piano to open a hidden door, to one of the game's key items. While the voice acting in this game is terrible, so terrible in fact that it was laughed at in 1996, drew so much praise to this game was its ability to create a world around the Spencer Mansion, making it a character in and of itself. As the setting for a horror game, it's also unlike any other at the time, being just a house full of zombies, demon dogs, and dreaded hunters, a late game entry which will completely wreck you. They have a pretty dope intro, showing their speed and making them feel truly ominous and a handful to fight, which they are, taking 3 whole shotgun shells to kill. Being the first game in the franchise, seeing the DNA that carries through to the rest of the series that started it all with the game's inception is fascinating to go back and see to this day, and it still holds up. This is my first time actually beating this game from soup to nuts, having only played spurts of it back at my friend Cameron's house. And in 2022, I could see why this game and series has garnered so much love from the fanbase. The world it sets up, the creation of the modern survival horror genre, the gameplay and lore all work really well here, and gel fantastically, and I absolutely adore it. If you have a PlayStation 1 or the ability to emulate this game, I would recommend going back for a jaunt. To do both runs took me about 6 to 8 hours, even with all the getting lost and screwing myself up on saves. It's definitely well worth your time. And with that, we've reached the end of the first video of the Resident Evil series, but what did you think of Resident Evil 1? Let me know in the comments down below, as I love reading them and love responding to them as well. And let me know what you think of this series idea as a whole. I'm really excited to go back through all the Resident Evil games, both as somebody who hasn't played almost all the original ones and as someone who actually really enjoys the newest versions of this series, starting with Resident Evil 4. If you enjoyed this video and made it this far in, please make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. It helps get this video out to more people and gets it more into the algorithm itself, which we are all beholden to. Hit that subscribe button for more content like this, and go check out all the older videos we've done, including Dead Rising, The Chronicles of Riddick, and the reboot of the Wolfenstein series. And until next time, my name is Brendan, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you all for watching.